Recording. So, hey everyone, I'm Dean Foley, and welcome to this recording workshop around Stories of Strength session around cultural safety launch yarn. I'll begin by just acknowledging traditional owners throughout the lands and pay my respects to elders past and present, and all Torres Strait Islander Aboriginal people who are joining, and everybody in the community who's working to continue to bring healing, safety, prevention and support around domestic violence. So today I'm joined by Semi Cooper from Marla Consulting. Semi brings important cultural safety, community and practice knowledge to this yarn, and I'm grateful to have her guiding this conversation, which we've finally been able to put together for today. Good old technology. But before we begin, this is a community education prevention awareness session workshop, so it is not like counselling or legal advice or crisis support, and we're not asking anybody to share personal details in the comment sections and that kind of stuff. Like, it's all private community information. Semi. Just thank everybody for joining, and everybody who's working hard in community to try to prevent and heal and solve the domestic violence problem we do have. So Semi's going to talk about cultural safety, community yarn like this, especially around domestic violence prevention and support. So I'll hand it over to you. I'll stop blabbering on and hand it over to you, Semi.
Thank you. Thanks everybody for joining. Before we begin, I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners. I'm a very proud Gumbaynggirr woman from the mid-north coast of New South Wales, and I would also like to acknowledge the Ngunnawal peoples down in Canberra as the traditional ongoing owners, custodians and caretakers of the lands which I live, work and play, and raise my own little family now. I pay my deepest respects to elders past and present, and acknowledge all of the emerging leaders coming up. I'd like to honour my people back home in Coffs Harbour, that region. It's such a beautiful part of the world, particularly the matriarchs who have held our communities together. These women are the drivers of language revival and cultural protection and the establishment of the first immersive school back home, where they are using both languages. So I extend that appreciation to them and to the knowledge and expertise of the women who have been such huge drivers of all of my knowledge in my life, and in particular in this area. We know that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander women are so overrepresented in this field, and we acknowledge the struggles and also the strengths of our peoples, and declare that sovereignty was never ceded, always was, always will be, and it's our job to start protecting and honouring our family systems in a way that honours culture and the strengths that we've already got. So Dean, if you just want to flick back over to presentation, I don't know if you can do that from your end so that we can get the slides up. That would be awesome. We'll get going. So what are we covering today? This yarn's not about defining cultural safety or explaining why it matters. It's about moving the conversation forward into how we as a community can be better, can show up better, and can support mob better. It's about community strengths, modelling and good systems. This is not a conversation that we have often when we try and talk about domestic and family violence. There's a lot of work around how we can support one-on-one or support crisis, and I know that we've got lots of really amazing presenters who will talk to that stuff. I just wanted to have a different side of the conversation. We know what domestic, family and sexual violence is. We know what cultural safety is. So the focus now is what's next. Why are we here? There's a lot of talk in community around wanting to help. We have such a beautiful network of people who genuinely want to support people who are experiencing domestic, family and sexual violence. And a lot of the times we want to help, but we don't always know what to say or how to help. And sometimes we're worried we'll say the wrong thing. Sometimes we think it's not our place. Sometimes we don't know where to send someone for support. And what we don't talk about enough is that one safe conversation can actually make a huge difference. And a safe yarn can help someone feel less isolated, let them know that they're heard and believed, and take away some of the shame. It can really connect people to support before things spiral further. And as organizations, as people working in community, it's important for us to remember no one is coming to us or calling us because they've had a good day. We often meet people in their hardest days. So that's our initial kind of starting point. If you want to flick over to the next slide, Dean. So where do we start? We're going to talk today a little bit about systems and about layering. So we rise and fall to the level of our systems. We really need good systems to support people. And I think we often start from the wrong question when we start to think through how we create spaces where people feel safe to disclose. I think we often need to come back a step. Maybe instead of asking how we create safe spaces for people to talk, we actually need to ask, how do we create somewhere safe for people to come and be as they are, whether they want to talk or not? So the question on the left here is, how do we create somewhere safe? And I completely acknowledge that it is incredibly important for people to have somewhere safe to go, somewhere safe to land. I just think we also need to think through, in terms of our systems and in terms of layering, I'll go through that a little bit later, how do we create environments where people can go and get help whether they want to talk or not? We also need to lean into community strengths and healing. So when we talk about prevention and healing, we need to remember that our communities already hold the strengths and most of the answers that we're looking for. We have strong cultures, we have elders and leaders, we have family and kinship systems, we have community-controlled organizations, we have knowledge that's been passed down through generations, and healing doesn't happen in isolation. It actually happens through connection. And as somebody with lived experience of domestic and family violence, as well as experience working in this space for a long time and working with organizations to work through culturally safe responses, connection to culture and community and country is actually the key here. So connection to safe and trusted supports and environments needs to start from a culturally safe place, but it also needs to start from our systems. So we jump through the next slide. I think it's important as well that we also acknowledge that how important trust is. So how many times have you seen this in community? I'm sure everybody's done it. Someone comes to you in community with a problem, with a completely unrelated issue, and it might be something like, my phone's not working, or can you help me get onto Medicare? And as soon as you've built that trust and followed through and done what you said you're going to do, all of a sudden you having a completely different yarn. We have it a lot with aunties in community when we go out and we start to have conversations around domestic and family violence. Often there's a shame barrier here or a trust barrier that means that people are not ready to tell you what they actually need help with. They need to know that they can trust you. So this is about holistic systems and holistic responses. Let's jump over to the next slide. You'll be able to see what I'm talking about. So what we're fighting here is a lack of knowledge. There's some shame, there's some guilt, there's some fear of systems here. And what we need is trust, respect, strengths-based work, and healing. For Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, trust exists side by side with cultural safety. That makes sense. We know that. But what it means in practice is that in every conversation we have, we're recognizing that there are impacts of colonization, intergenerational trauma, and systemic barriers here. But we also need to recognize strengths, resilience, culture, and connection here that exist side by side. Both things happen at the same time. And people are more likely to seek support when we know that is embedded in every conversation, that cultural safety is forefront, and then it's not a deficit narrative here that we're focusing on. They're more likely to ask questions, more likely to access services, more likely to trust that they'll be treated with dignity and with respect when our initial conversations are rooted in cultural safety. And it's not just the responsibility of services, it's something that all of us can contribute to, because help seeking looks different for everyone. Not everybody is going to want to come and disclose what's happening for them. And that is completely okay. People deserve help regardless of whether they want to disclose their experiences or not. And the service system roundabout, we know that people have sometimes reached out to 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 different services trying to get help before they come to us and before they land on our door. And we don't want to be re-triggering people by expecting that they will continue to tell their stories over and over again. That's just re-traumatizing people completely unnecessarily. So if we have good systems and we have organizations who are working in culturally safe ways and layering that contact with community, which I'll go through in a minute, it makes it much more accessible for people to genuinely get help at a time when they need it most. So some people might be more comfortable talking to a health worker or community organizations or a counsellor or support service. It's not always going to be that somebody calls the police as a first response to try and get help. So we just need to remember that wherever they are reaching out and wherever they are reaching us from is where we need to meet them. We need to really meet people where they're at. Sometimes the hardest step for people, but also for organizations, is knowing where to start. So one of the most important things we can do as community members is to normalize help seeking and help fight these things on the left. Let's help fight the lack of knowledge. Let's empower communities with more knowledge around not just what domestic and family and sexual violence is and what it can look like, but also what responses can look like. Let's embed trust and respect and strengths-based practice and remind ourselves and anybody who needs help that reaching out is actually a sign of strength and courage and self-determination. It takes an incredible amount of courage for somebody to come forward to say, I actually need help. We can help create environments where asking for help is seen as something positive and somewhere that it's encouraged rather than somewhere that makes people feel like they are being judged or that brings any kind of layer of shame. So we need to break all of those things down first. Let's jump to the next slide. It'll make a little bit of sense. So this slide is really talking about prevention. Sorry, the slides have come up a little bit funny, but I'll be able to talk through it, so don't worry. So language really matters when we're working with mob and when we're working with communities. We need to remember that there are strong families, strong cultures. We have all of these strengths that are embedded into our cultures: healing and well-being, connection to country, community leadership. Prevention is obviously about responding to all sorts of violence, but it's also about strengthening the things that keep people safe in the first place. And I'm going to keep going back to systems because it really matters. This makes such a huge difference. Systems and layering. We know supports and systems that keep people safe can quickly become barriers when cultural safety is not embedded, and language can really contribute to somebody feeling like they are not in a culturally safe space. When we start to use deficit narratives, when we start to make negative assumptions, when we start to not check our biases for somebody who is help seeking, and when we start to put unrealistic expectations on people who are seeking help, we very quickly erode cultural safety. And from that moment, there is an initial barrier that we haven't even stepped over yet before we can really start to link people in with support services. So let's use strengths-based language. Let's be honest and upfront. Let's be clear with people when they do reach out for help, exactly what they can expect from us, exactly what we can do. And let's be honest about the things that we cannot do. Clear is kind. We are strong, our women are strong, our children are strong, and our culture is centered on strengths. We've been here for 30,000 plus years. We know that we can support people, but we need to do it in the right way. We really need to embed the right language so that in that initial conversation, when we do have somebody reach out to us, that we are not closing the door on them completely unintentionally from the beginning. Let's move to the next slide. I'm going to talk through a little about what the principles of cultural safety and culturally safe ways are. So too often our discussions focus solely on deficits, on risk, and on harm. And they are true, they are real, and they are a part of the story, but they cannot be the only story that we tell. Culture is a protective factor. Connection is a protective factor. Our identity is a protective factor. Our community is a protective factor. So let's talk about some safe ways that we can have these conversations. Let's focus on talking to people, to community, to people reaching out about healthy relationships. This helps people recognize whether or not their experiences match up without constantly pushing a narrative of what violence is on people that can make people retract. I know from my lived experience that I initially ended up disclosing to a health worker in a completely unrelated conversation because all of a sudden this health worker was talking to me about what a healthy relationship looked like. And it was an initial way for me, an initial layer, and we will get on to layering in the next couple of slides, an initial point of contact for me that made me go, actually, mine doesn't look like that. That's not how I'm feeling. I'm not feeling safe. I'm not feeling loved. I'm not feeling valued and nurtured. So an initial conversation that focuses on healthy relationships can sometimes be a really gentle way of opening up what help might look like for people. Back to the slides, we can talk about community challenges. In a third person kind of sense, it helps people to comment on patterns of behavior instead of their stories. So lots of organizations run incredible initiatives like yarning circles and that kind of thing. They can sometimes focus too much, though, on have you seen these things? Have you experienced these things? Instead of having a really broad conversation, let's talk about community challenges. Let's talk about what have we seen in community? What do we know are challenges in our communities that talk about patterns of behavior instead of asking people to talk about their individual experiences or about their family members or about their friends and loved ones who are going through these things. Let's avoid labels. Let's use plain language. Describe behaviors that you want to have a conversation about in plain language. There's a lot of rhetoric around using language from legislation so that people are really clear on where their next steps might land. And I think that that's a really valuable part of these ways of moving forwards. But when we start to use words and language like coercive control and financial abuse, often it creates a barrier for people to be able to talk earnestly and in a really genuine way about their experience. So we can use language if we are having conversations with people about violence that they're experiencing or that they've seen, that helps remove some of the fear around not knowing how to explain their experience or not knowing exactly what language to use. Just let people be as they are, particularly if they are going through experiences where they're not feeling like they're clear in the mind about what they want to do or about what they're experiencing, about what next steps are. If somebody is experiencing violence, they're not having a good day. And I mean that in a really nice way. Obviously, domestic and family and sexual violence is a really horrendous physical experience, but often psychologically, it can really make people feel really muddled. And when we start to use labels, it can be a barrier. So let's use clear language. Let's use hit. Let's use shout it out. Let's use stop you from seeing family or taking money. Take this language away from isolation and move it into a conversation that everybody can have at the same time so that we're not having two separate conversations in a parallel way. And we can use well-known campaigns. If you're doing work in community, let's jump off campaigns, and there's a list here that you can have a bit of a look at and use some of their similar language. They've got ambassadors who are already on board. Lots of these organizations and campaigns have got really well-established pamphlets and information and ideas. Turn Up Respect, You Right Sis is incredible. They've got some really good video series. It Ain't Weak to Speak, No More, Our Ways, Strong Ways is a really recent one that hopefully gets off the ground, and Violence Is Not Our Way. So there's lots of well-known campaigns that you can either use in your organizations or that you can go to for ideas. You don't need to kind of continue to recreate the wheel if we're talking about what community knowledge might look like or talking about sharing education in community. So I'll jump to the next slide. And this one's a little bit hard to see, sorry, because the boxes didn't come across, but hopefully you can see that okay, and I'll talk it through. So the word that I've been using a lot is layering at the start and all through our presentation. And here's what I mean. So layering is something I think politicians use all of the time, right? In their contact with us. They're everywhere. They're in our schools. They're handing out awards. They're standing out the front of IGA. They're on our fridges, on magnets. They're absolutely everywhere. They're doing mailbox drops. So at any point of the day, you can see a politician's face or their name 2 or 3 times, kind of without even knowing. And I think that's a really key thing that we can use when we talk about how to do domestic and family violence prevention work, because it's not confronting, it's just constant. So the last place, obviously, people want to talk is out the front of IGA when they're, waving flyers in your face and asking you what you want done in your community. But this is about constant messaging, and especially with mob. So people need to trust you before they will open up about what's going on. But we can embed ways of meeting services in the community, of layering people and letting people experience your service in community before somebody really needs you. So you can send workers to attend markets and sporting events and community barbecues and school events. This is not about referrals or about assessments or about having really deep conversations with people about their experiences of violence. This is just about relationship building. That is absolutely the key. Relationships are the work. So the most effective long-term initiatives often focus on respectful relationships, culture, positive role modeling, community accountability, healthy communication, and challenging harmful attitudes. But we can do that with small acts every day as organizations. So you can run a footy or a netball or a gala day, or jump on the back of one and run a No to DV campaign. The Queensland Indigenous Family Violence Legal Service run one. They just run a big No to DV campaign. So they're a good idea to jump on if you haven't seen what they've been doing. There's warm referrals between services. Obviously, that's a really key part of people experiencing the service system, which can be a bit of a roundabout. People feel like they're just getting sent from one place to the other, call after call after call, not getting anywhere. We need culturally safe services. An idea for, jump onto the slides for me, Dean, an idea for this idea of layering is signs on the toilet doors in shops, because that's a safe place where everybody can go. Everybody goes to do the groceries. Everybody goes to do whatever it might be, in your community. Some have, big Westfields, and other people just have a local IGA. But having signs or information or places where people can access you or call, or QR codes on the doors in places where they won't be flagged if they're being tracked, or if they're feeling a bit of shame, or if they're not sure that they want people to know what's happening, particularly in smaller communities. It's a really effective way of making this accessible and making help accessible. You can run information nights for teens and parents. I was part of an initiative that ran information sessions and got in touch with all of the local high schools and put on, some afternoon tea or some dinner, or, just snacks or whatever it might be, and had a panel of people talking there was one from police, one from a lived experience perspective, some from different organisations in the communities, about domestic and family violence and prevention in young people. And they ran a women's session for young girls and their parents, and also a men's session for young boys and their parents, to talk about what healthy relationships really look like. Beyond DV do some really good work. They're in southeast Queensland and just expanding up north along the Queensland coast as well. And they also have these initiatives called Hope Hubs, which are in big Westfields, so that, again, people can come to a Westfield, access safety. They're usually located as separate rooms with safe doors right next to the bathrooms, so they're easy to access, right? This is about layering again. You can have yarning circles and weaving without a focus on domestic and family violence. You can just open up a space where people can come and have trusted faces from community, from domestic and family violence services, from support services, who are in those weaving circles, so that somebody might have an opportunity to come up to you afterwards, to start to build a relationship, or to maybe be brave enough to ask a question. But this is about creating opportunities for people to see you and to experience the service in community without having to walk through the doors. That's often such a massive barrier that we don't think about. We need trusted faces at events. You can run breakfast clubs at schools. There's some really great initiatives happening at Southwest New South Wales, going kind of around the country here, who run breakfast clubs at schools where parents can either drop them off, or they've got a bus that goes around and picks kids up, so that there's, again, another trusted face and another way that people can talk about what's happening, or actually they can just come to school and be safe and be fed. And the other really effective way of being able to have contact happening is to have merch with safe numbers on it. There's lots of little booklets that people can put in their wallets. Some people have got magnets or notepads with some down the bottom, with contacts down the bottom. So there's lots of really effective ways that you can layer contact in community without actually asking people to come and disclose what's happening to them. And it's really important that we focus on this relationship work, particularly with mob. If we jump onto the next slide, let me move that across. So these are just some other ideas, and I hope people take these. I don't know what's happened to that image down the bottom, but I hope you can take some of this stuff if you're not already doing it and really start to embed it. So QR codes that people can scan in the back of community halls, or again, on the back of toilet doors is a good one. But anywhere that you think people might be able to access without it being obvious that somebody is trying to access help for domestic and family violence. QR codes are great. People can scan them on their phone. It's not obvious initially exactly what it is. And have them in places where people can stand there and try and scan them without it being really obvious that someone is trying to take a picture of it. So think through where else that might land. Trusted local champions is a really good one. They do an incredible job of that up in the Torres Strait, heading back up the other way of the country. They've got an incredible program where they've got trusted local champions who work with all of the services as kind of like a community translator, I suppose. They do an absolutely amazing job. You can do some research on that stuff. The Southwest Queensland run Coffee with a Cop. And that's a bit of a controversial one, depending on your community and how it all works. You guys are the experts in your community, so I'm not going to tell you that that's exactly what you need to do. But sometimes when we think through what crisis looks like for people, if they do need police and there's no trusted relationships, that can actually be incredibly traumatizing for somebody who is already going through an incredibly hard time. So Coffee with a Cop is an initiative that is happening probably in lots of different places. I did an evaluation where we heard from the services and also from Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander women who were experiencing domestic and family violence and connected in with the DV service, where once a week on a Wednesday morning, whatever it is, the service puts on coffee and morning tea, and there's a cop there who just comes and has a yarn, or is obviously willing and able to take referrals, but they said that that's actually never happened. It usually happens that they just come, they have a coffee, it's all really warm, friendly, nothing formal, and it helps to break down the stigma of what it might look like if you call police. It also gives people, if you rotate the police through, maybe this is what we should be talking to Queensland Police about, or National Police Services about. If you rotate people through, there's a couple of different safe faces, so that community have got a trusted person that they feel like they can call it, that they can go to. There's lots of DV liaisons in police now across the different jurisdictions. So it's just another idea and another way of trying to break down as many barriers as we can without asking people to disclose their experiences or disclose their stories. There's youth videos on positive relationships is a really incredible one. There's lots on YouTube who have been done usually by a mob in community, and they are just the most wholesome things that you could ever watch, and so effective because you have young people communicating the importance of healthy relationships to other young people. Run monthly barbecues. If you feed people, they will usually come because it's not a scary or a formal environment. And again, it's another way of creating a level of trust, of having trusted faces around in a space where they're not being asked to disclose what is happening. So yarning circles are great. I just feel like there needs to be more informal contact with community. And murals, community walls, community projects, they are such a beautiful way for community to be able to come together and to really help break down any of the barriers. So every one of us has a role to play in creating communities where people feel safe and respected and supported. And we actually don't need people's stories to start conversations. That's my key message here. We don't need disclosure to talk about prevention and healthy relationships. What we need are culturally safe spaces, good systems that are in place that are embedded in cultural safety. That could be a whole yarn on its own. So hopefully somebody is talking about that. But I'm really happy to talk to you about it. If you want to give me a buzz at any time, actually anybody watching this, I'm very happy to take a call. And respectful relationships and clear pathways to support. So we need to embed culturally safe practices in all of those areas, but we don't have time to go through everything that might look like in half an hour. So I just want to help to create a different conversation, because that's how we help create stronger families and stronger communities and stronger futures. So we've got one last slide here that's just got questions and reflections, and I didn't put my contact details on there, but I'm happy for Dean to pass them on. And we're just about out of time. So I'm just putting it out there to say that if you do have questions or if you do have reflections after you watch this, I'm really happy, Dean, if people want to get in touch with you, I'm happy for you to pass on my number, or you can actually just find me online. It's www.marlaconsulting.com.au. Marla is Maarla. So happy to happy to yarn at any time for whatever people need.
And yeah, appreciate that. It's really invaluable, and appreciate your time to have a quick chat about everything. No questions for me. That's how I found you online. I'm sure you've got heaps of content out there, but yeah, found you online and got in contact. But yeah, thank you, Semi, for talking about cultural safety. It's and no questions for me. But do you feel like something you weren't able to talk about during this quick yarn that may be important to people to know about? Is there anything that you're doing that's coming up in the future?
I think one of the most important things that we need to do is something like a cultural safety audit in organisations. I think we really need to get clear on what culturally safe service delivery looks like. And obviously we can't cover that in half an hour. But it really needs to be embedded in such an integral way as business as usual, not just for mob, working with mob, but for mainstream organisations as well. You really need to get clear, get relationships with community. That is the starting point for everything. Relationships are the work. You can't do anything without them. And do a cultural safety audit. There's free resources from places like the Lowicha Institute online where you can do a cultural safety audit. There's lots of free stuff. You don't have to pay for this stuff, right? You just have to make time to think about it and think it through. So have culturally safe service delivery, do a cultural safety audit, do one for free. And yeah, again, I'm just happy to chat to anybody about any questions I've got. I'm always open for a yarn.
Yeah, appreciate that. And thanks again. And if anybody needs confidential support, obviously you have 1800 Respect. It's also, 13 Yarn, Lifeline, and you may even have like local Aboriginal controlled or culturally safe services, which may be appropriate. Like Semi said, I think, all organized, or most of them need like a cultural safety audit. So, but yeah, there's a lot of services out there that might be able to help. So thanks again, Sammy, and keep in contact.
Yeah, that sounds good. Thanks so much. We'll talk to you soon. Bye.
Thank you. Cool. So hi everybody. My name is Dean Foley, and welcome to Stories of Strength session. So recognize, respond, and refer. So this is a short little yarn session with Hannah, and just looking to increase awareness around key issues around domestic violence, and the purpose is community education, prevention awareness, and just helping better recognize the warning signs and to be able to respond safely and connect people with the appropriate support pathways. So just a quick disclaimer, it's not a counselling session or giving a legal advice, and I'm not asking anybody to share personal details or sensitive information in the comment section with this video. So without further ado, really pleased to introduce Hannah Taylor. Feel free to virtually correct me. Your last name is
Hannah Taylor.
Yeah, my apologies. But you're Camilleri or Gamori?
Yeah, so I added my husband's name onto mine because I refused to give up Taylor. So that's where the symmetry is from. Yeah, Italian.
Nice. And doing PhD in the School of Public Health Facility of Medicine at University of Queensland, and her focus is on the intersection factors of coercive control for First Nations women, and her research centers the voice of First Nations women. So without blabbering on and going on, I'll hand it over to you, Hannah. But if you've got any questions, just or if you need me, just let me know.
Amazing. So thanks so much, Dean, for having me today to have a yarn. So my name, like Dean was yarning about, my name is Hannah Taylor Sivatarees. So I'm a proud Gamilaroi woman from Boggabilla Cunnamulla country up in Queensland, and I come to you today from Ghana country in South Australia. So thank you so much to the amazing people and the amazing people in Adelaide that have allowed me to live on this country, to work on this country and raise my children in this space. So as Dean mentioned, I am a PhD candidate, so currently in the write-up stage of my PhD on the intersecting factors of coercive control for First Nations women. And so I come to you today to have a really high-level yarn about coercive control and understanding the warning signs about looking and, worrying about if your mate or somebody you know is ever in need of these yarns and these conversations, or even yourself. I do just want to start out by saying that some of these conversations and the things that we talk about today may be pretty hard to hear, and I may say them quite quickly off my tongue. But I do just want to say that, my father, who's a proud Gamilaroi man, he always yarns up about being connected. So connected to yourself, other people, spirituality, and the earth. And when one of those is disconnected, we within ourselves feel sick and that disconnection. So I challenge us today to make sure that we're feeling connected. And if you need a minute to go outside and get your feet in the dirt or feel the sun on your face or the rain on your body, make sure you do that. Make sure you have a yarn with somebody else over a cuppa. Make sure you connect to yourself internally and your ancestors and spirituality. So I do just want to make sure that we're always staying connected and looking after ourselves, which is super important in this work and this role. So I come to you today as a social worker and a coercive control expert. I do just want to say the reason that I can do this research is because of the amazing ancestors that have gone before me, and also the voices of the women that I have been honoured to partnership with this research through. And so it's their voices that we hear today and their songs that we hear sung through this research. I do just want to say the reason that I got into researching about coercive control, I'm not an academic by trade. My family did laugh a lot when I told them that I'd started a PhD and I applied for one, is because coercive control is such a westernized concept. And when I talk about it, it is within the Western constructs of coming from England, coming from Wales. And Evan Stark, who coined the terminology around coercive control, he really brought it from those westernized countries into Australia, and it really didn't fit, and it doesn't fit for our First Nations community. And so I got real riled up about the fact that our voices weren't being heard, we weren't at the table, and also it would lead into the misidentification of our communities, which is already high rates as it is. So I didn't want it to be weaponized against us, and so therefore we started this journey of research into what else coerces and controls First Nations people. And so what I'm going to talk to you today is specifically about the warning signs and what you can see in relation to coercive control. So coercive control is what I would, in the high-level conversation, I would say it is when somebody tries to have power, control, and domination over a person. So it's an underlining pattern and an underlining theme of all domestic and family violence. So when you hear about physical violence, sexual violence, financial, psychological, cultural violence, the underlining theme throughout these whole entire things is coercive control, which is a pattern of behaviour that occurs over a period of time with the intention to cause harm on a victim survivor. I do identify that I use gendered words in these conversations, and I use man as perpetrator, and I often use woman as a victim survivor. That's not to say that men don't experience domestic and family violence, and that's not to say that the victims are always female. However, in the research, it does identify that men are more likely to be the perpetrators of domestic violence. That is also, I also want to say that I use the gendered focus, and I do apologise because that's not including our sister brothers and our brother boys and brother girls. Oh my God. Brother boys and sister girls as well. Please cut that bit out. And so I do acknowledge that domestic and family violence, coercive control occurs in our LGBTIQA plus community as well. And so I will try not to use the gendered natures. However, they do just slip off the tongue. So I'm learning as well. So, like I said before, coercive control is a pattern of behaviour. A perpetrator uses coercive control as a pattern of behaviour over a period of time with the intention to cause harm and hold somebody's autonomy over them. So it is when a perpetrator uses power, control, and dominance over a victim survivor. They attack their identity, their self-autonomy, their self-determination, and their strength. So when we yarn up about in terms of like, well, what are the warning signs? People always ask me, what are the warning signs? What have I got to look out for? You know, there's so many for people for their personal life. How do I meet somebody that's not going to try and coerce and control me on Tinder or all of the different apps? Or how do I know that somebody isn't love bombing me? I always start by saying, if it doesn't feel right, it probably isn't right. We've been taught, especially as people that identify as women, we've been taught to gaslight ourselves and our third eye or our gut instincts over time, so we don't even believe ourselves, and we know something doesn't fit or sit right. However, we just think, oh, nah, I'm just being overprotective. Nah, I've got trauma. Nah, I've got this, I've got that. We belittle the reasons away. However, if you're on a date or if you're in a situation, if a friend is in a situation or somebody's in a situation and you say to them, does it feel good? Does it feel right? And if they're like, I'm not sure, then it probably isn't right. If something doesn't sit well, it probably isn't right. And so never discredit your gut instincts when you're in these situations, because 10 out of 10 times, they're probably correct. And sometimes, as a First Nations woman, our ancestors are talking to us and giving us warning signs. So if something doesn't feel right, it probably isn't right. So often when people start a relationship, we become encompassed by the person. You want to hang out with the person every second of every day. You have all of these amazing dopamine hits going around, all of these chemicals in your brain, and you feel like this person has become your world. What happens in a relationship where there's an underlying pattern of coercive control is that person, the perpetrator who's using coercive control tactics to have power, dominance, and control over you, they will bring you up, and they will, in terms of love bomb, so they will tell you everything that you want to hear. They'll mimic your beliefs and your value systems. If you say you like long walks on the beach, oh my gosh, I do. If you say that you like certain movies, oh my gosh, all of a sudden they have the same and appreciations. And so it's almost just like, I'm a very visual person, so they'll build you up and take you really, 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 really high on this piece of string, and then all of a sudden drop you. So violence doesn't start, and abuse doesn't start at the beginning necessarily of the relationship. People don't go on a date often, not all the time. Sometimes this does happen in a long-term relationship that a perpetrator is using coercive control. The relationship doesn't start off as violent or abusive. It happens over a period of time because it is a pattern of behavior. And so the person that is using these coercive control tactics will bring this person up, and like I said before, they will drop them. It's like an intense roller coaster ride. And what a victim survivor will do is they'll just say, oh my gosh, I hear this so often. We had this really wholesome time at the beginning. It was really beautiful. I want to get back there. I know that he is this really amazing person over here, and we had such a beautiful time. However, when I do things like, or I wear certain things, or, he drinks or something, it disconnects that time. So what do I need to do to get back here? And I just want to say, this part of this wild ride of this love bombing, a perpetrator that is using coercive control tactics is a facade. This whole mirage doesn't exist, and it is not a factual space to base a relationship on. So I often hear, victim survivors saying, if I can just change my behavior, or, if I was nicer, if I just stopped talking to this guy or this person or my family or something, then we would be able to get back to this really wholesome time. And I often tell people, before that time, when you just met them, did it feel right? Was there something in your gut that said, hang on, this is not a safe space? And 9 out of 10 times the person will be like, yeah, it doesn't fit, it doesn't feel good, it doesn't feel right. But in that but, how much of yourself are you compromising? And so just a reminder that facade does not exist, that space that they live in does not exist. And it's almost like a perpetrator will use a Jenga kind of concept to, you know how you play Jenga and you pull out all of the pieces and it becomes quite unstable. They pull the pieces of Jenga out and they insert them with their lies and the belief system that they want that victim survivor to have, and then they pull it and the things fall down. And the only time that I've seen perpetrators try and go back to that facade and that mirage is when the victim survivor is thinking about leaving or is saying, you know, I'm actually not loving this relationship. They will go back to that space and give them a high. So it's also called the cycle of violence and the power and control wheel. So if you ever wanted some late night reading, have a look at those ones. So other signs to look out for is feelings of isolation. So a coercive control perpetrator, remember, they want to gain power over the person, they want to gain control, and they want to gain dominance over the person. They'll do that through isolation. So isolating them from their friends, isolating them from their family, from their community, from cultural ways of doing things, from cultural days. So things like NAIDOC, not allowing them to go and celebrate with community, because disconnection means that victim survivor is more dependent on the perpetrator and the person using those coercive controls. So if they can, you know, there's amazing apps nowadays in relation to how a person can be coerced and controlled. So text facilitated abuse is something that I always warn people about around, you know, there is no need to share your Snapchat location 24/7 with different people, especially somebody that is a perpetrator, or your Life 360, or all of those different concepts and different apps and location devices. Because why does a person need to know where you are all the time? If it's in terms to protect you, well, there's other ways in which that can happen. And who holds the power, who holds the control, and who holds the dominance? So, and in terms of, you know, other things like the perpetrator may call the victim survivor's workplace all the time, and that is a form of control, but also to cause financial abuse, because the person may lose their job and therefore be more dependent on the perpetrator. What a perpetrator is trying to do is attack someone's autonomy, their self, their identity, their cultural identity, and their connections. Because if that victim survivor becomes dependent on the perpetrator, they hold the power, they hold the dominance, and they hold control. And I always tell people in relation to, and this is just my view, not as an academic, but as a mum, as a wife, as a woman, as a proud Aboriginal woman, in no other relationship, often I hear people say, you know, oh, we're going to share bank accounts straight away because we want to be open and honest with each other. Well, in no other relationship ever is a person expected to share and hold a bank account with somebody else. It's only in intimate partner relationships that a person is, there's this unspoken rule that you need to then share bank accounts. You know, I definitely believe in financial independence and will always advise, no matter what type of relationship you're in, to always hold your own money, always hold your own accounts, always hold things for yourself, and you don't necessarily have to divulge and disclose them all the time. So other things to look out for, again, if it doesn't feel right, it probably isn't right. The perpetrators are subtle. So they use subtle things to kind of take somebody else's, like to pull down somebody's identity and take a hold of who they are. And they do that through mocking. So often it's just passed off as a joke. If a victim survivor has told that perpetrator something really intimate, they can often use that in a public space as a form of mocking. And so they can mock the victim survivor about their culture, about the knowledge that they do or don't have, about their parenting, especially if that is a very big part of their identity. They will start to attack the key aspects of that victim survivor's identity. So things as culture, mocking culture, if they're non-Indigenous, mocking their Indigenous culture and their connections, mocking their community, mocking their knowledge, mocking them as a person, and casting it all off as a joke. Because if you attack someone, if you come back with somebody that's having a joke, you're just like, well, it's just a joke. And then the person, the victim survivor, is gaslit to, you know, push back and to calm down. So it then starts to attack their identity and break that down. So the perpetrator will mock the person consistently. This can happen indoors, this can happen outdoors. Remember, these are the beginning signs, because it doesn't always hit the quite intense levels of violence at the beginning. It happens over a period of time. So monitoring where the person is, isolating them, saying who they can't and can hang out with. You know, other forms of coercive control in terms of cultural ways is, I've heard often that a Indigenous man will take an Indigenous woman onto a men's business site where it's a sacred site for only men to go, and he will force her to be on that site, and which then impacts her mental health, which then impacts her connectedness to country and can impact her lineage consistently. And that is a form to control. You know, the perpetrator can control what a victim survivor wears. And again, it starts through the subtle jokes. Are you really going to wear that? Like, oh, maybe you should think about something different. And so all of a sudden, every single aspect of that victim survivor's world is coerced and controlled. So they can control their money, they can control who they spend time with, they control where they can go, they can control how much time they have with their kids. And then even in things such as reproductive and sexual coercion, often I hear women that want to finish university, or they don't want to have children, or they want to wait and get things settled. And all of a sudden, what we call stealthing is a man can remove a condom and then have that woman is then pregnant from a sexual encounter. And she may not want necessarily to have the child. However, he has coerced and controlled her. And sometimes in those situations, that child is then obviously connected to him. And so it's another way in which he can coerce and control her. There's often ways in which we see older men with really younger women. And we know that the power imbalances are so great, and that perpetrator has already groomed her family to be that he is this shining star, he is a great person. And that's called image management, in the fact that to everybody else, he seems like this charismatic, amazing, beautiful person, whereas behind closed doors, he's exerting power, control, and dominance over the victim survivor. So that then when the victim survivor goes to potentially her family or other people and says, hey, I don't feel safe, he says these things to me sometimes, this perpetrator has already groomed all of these people to stand up for him and then discredit what she says, again, consistently continuing that gaslighting of her. So, you know, he calls her job 20 times a day, which she could lose, and then again she'd be more independent on him. And so he wants to have dominance, control, and power over her. So he may get his family involved as well, so that they also exert power and control over her, over the situation. She may be on his country, so she may also then not have the power of being connected to her own country. She may be dependent on him and his family. And we see this often in our communities and also other communities as well. Because often if you're having a yarn with someone and they're talking about, you know, I have to cook for him, I have to have the food prepared when he gets home, you know, we watch what he wants to watch because that's what he wants to do. It's always asking them the question, you know, okay, well, if you wanted to not cook or you wanted to watch something else, what would that look like? What would those conversations look like? And if she says, no, I enjoy cooking, I want to do that, then that's fine if that's that person's choice. But if she says, you know, yeah, I actually don't want to watch whatever he's watching, I would love to watch something else, but that's just, we just don't go there. That can then show that there is potentially coercion and control being utilized in that situation. And remember, violence is not always, coercive control is not always physical violence. It is a pattern of behavior to control a person, to have power over a person, and to dominate a person. And part of my research is around colonization and coercive control, and the same behavioral tactics in colonization is the same tactics in coercive control, which comes to genders-based violence. And when we look at westernized gendered roles around cooking and cleaning and parenting, the woman always being the parent at home, the woman looking after everything, I always ask people, you know, who holds the power, who holds the dominance, and who holds the control? Is it equal? Do you both sit in a situation where you're both holding the power? Are you both holding the control over all of the decisions? Are you both holding the dominance over all of the decisions and the financial decisions? Or are they all based on one person, usually the man, and what they want to do in the situation? And so I've seen these westernized roles become a way in which coercive control can continue through a relationship. So it's always asking those questions. If a person looks as though they are fulfilling westernized gendered roles, asking them, is that what you want to do? Is that how you want to parent? Do you want the partnership? And just having those yarns and those conversations as well. And I always come back to the fact that if it doesn't feel right, it probably isn't right. If you have somebody that you are worried about or concerned about, you can always contact 1-800-RESPECT for a domestic and family violence framework of understanding to be able to have a conversation with or a yarn with and say, hey, I'm worried about my friend. You do not have to give them your name or your information. You can be anonymous. If you're looking for a culturally safe response, I always say call 13 Yarn. They can provide you with a culturally safe response in relation to what you're experiencing, or if you need some support. If anyone does want more training in relation to how to respond to First Nations people in relation to domestic and family violence, DV Alert provides free training for anyone on recognising, responding and referring around domestic and family violence. And so they have specialist training across the country as well. So I just want to come back, and I hope all my ramble made sense in the fact that if it doesn't feel right, it probably isn't right. Never negate those warning signs. Never negate those warning signs for yourselves and for other people in the community as well. Be independent. Hold your own bank accounts. Hold your own space. You do not have to share your location with anybody, and you can continue to be independent. Sorry, Dean. I just saw you come on in.
Yeah, I jumped in too early. Sorry about that. Yeah, appreciate that. That was absolutely amazing. There's a lot of stuff in there, and just a random question, random thought, because there's a lot to take in. Like, is there like not like a questionnaire, but like people can like check and get like a response back to, like, what are they called? You know, like you take these, you fill out these forms, and then it gives you back like your personality and that kind of stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Like, is there one where you can complete and it gives you back like the risk levels or how much coercive control
a person is experiencing? No, I mean, that's a great idea. You can do web chat with 1-800-RESPECT. So if you're worried about certain behaviours, or if you're like he makes comments or he doesn't let me go certain places, and it can be more subtle in the fact that, you know, the reason the terminology gaslighting came from back in the day, he didn't live in the house, a perpetrator would turn on the light and then leave the premises. So she came home and there was always a light on. And so she's like, hang on, did I leave the light on? Didn't I? And she would criticize herself and critique herself to the point that she didn't believe and didn't trust herself whether or not she had or hadn't turned a light on. And that's where the term gaslighting comes from. And so to answer your question, you can go onto 1-800-RESPECT to see, you know, is this what's happening? And it's always great to have a sounding board as well. I often ask people that, you know, come to me and we have a yarn about DV. I have, you know, quite often I'm talking about domestic and family violence, and I'll just say, you know, how did you feel in the situation? How do you feel in the situation? Do you feel that you can, you know, just exit here and do what you need to? Do you feel free to be able to go wherever you need to go? And it's often that people say, you know, well, perpetrators are, you know, they can't control. And I always come back to that and just say, well, actually, I've seen a lot of perpetrators control their tempers, control their violence, control the way in which what they say and the way in which they treat their victims, their partner in public. And so I do always say that they have the ability to control themselves. Violence and abuse and coercive control is never the victim survivor's fault. It's never the perpetrator is never theirs to heal. That person has to go off and do the healing with themselves, by themselves, with their community, with other people. And the victim survivor is never responsible for that person's behavior, for that person's coercive control, for that person's outburst. And so often I hear people say, oh, if I just didn't say X, Y, Z, or if I didn't do X, Y, Z. No, you can be who you are and the person that you are. They can be the person that they are. However, their behavior is never your responsibility. And in no other situation do you ever hear somebody mention what the victim survivor was wearing, what they were doing, how they were acting. You know, I know you just asked one question, but this is just to go on to something else. So often we hear, you know, the one punch kill campaign, and all of a sudden all pubs are shut down and they've got this massive campaign going on, which as they should. However, no one in that situation asked what the victim survivor was doing. No one was like, oh, you never hear whether or not the victim survivor of the one punch was intoxicated, what they were wearing, how they were acting. It's just the focus is on the perpetrator, as it should be. You know, it's only in intimate partner violence and domestic and family violence and sexual violence that the victim survivor is so incredibly scrutinized, which we need to stop. So I just wanted to make sure that I said that none of that perpetrator's behavior is the victim survivor's responsibility or fault. So yes, you can get in contact 1-800-RESPECT, sorry, to answer your question. Look at the different warning signs in relation to DV, but I just always challenge people is women know and men know, people know within themselves sometimes we just minimize the voice or we silence the voice within us, but if it doesn't feel right, it isn't right.
And if the person themselves are struggling, you know, with the daily struggles and not too sure, like, is there what does a referral or warm referral look like instead of
instead of what, sorry?
Oh no, yeah, instead of just the individual, like if somebody sees
If somebody sees, so do you mean like if somebody's worried about their friend or if they're worried about themselves or?
Yeah, I'm a bit ADHD, so probably both. Like, how does a warm referral and also like an external referral, like how do people who aren't sure, like, do they ask questions? Like, can they report it or?
Yeah, so if you're worried about a friend or someone in the community and you're close and comfortable with them and you feel that you have the right words, sometimes you can have a talk to them, have a yarn with them, the victim survivor that is. Sometimes we get so worried about fumbling and saying things wrong. You know, I often will ask friends and community and people how they feel in a situation, and you know, you can watch when the phone rings a million times and you can see, you know, the person's body behavior changes and they get a little bit worried. Often, you know, in life there's stresses, absolutely. However, a person should not feel unsafe or they're minimizing themselves or making themselves smaller to fit into a relationship. People can be all that they can be and who they're called to be and who our ancestors have called us to be. And if that person feels like they can't put language to something, I just feel like he does, I can't put words to it. He just doesn't, he just does this stuff that makes me feel like annoyed or, you know, then unpack it with them. You guys can call 1-800-RESPECT together and just say, look, we just want a sounding board to have a look at these types of behaviors and see what is happening. And oftentimes that the situation where you can't necessarily put words to it is often coercive control, because you're like, oh, but he doesn't hit me. And that is not a catalyst. That is not a measuring mark from whether or not there is domestic and family violence. That is a part of domestic and family violence. And, you know, when women become pregnant or when they want to leave or when they have children, they're the most high-risk times for that person. And so it's asking questions around safety and ensuring that they're safe. But I would always say, if you're ever in doubt, call 1-800-RESPECT. You can do web chat as well. And then, you know, if somebody's in immediate risk of harm, I would always say contact the police.
Yeah, thanks for that. And thanks for your time and invaluable knowledge. It's been amazing. And yeah, a lot to take in at times, but very important and much needed education session, awareness session. So yeah, really appreciate that. Thanks, Hannah.
Anytime. Thanks so much. If you've got any questions, find me.
Sure. Yeah, online. And do you have an academic profile?
I just have LinkedIn. I'm not that fancy, so or Instagram, you know.
Not an elite academic yet, so.
No, thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Hannah. Yeah, appreciate that. And yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
Hi, everybody. My name's Dean Foley, and welcome to the Stories of Strength session. So this one's going to be around healing, resilience, and support pathways in domestic violence awareness and education. So it's just a short recording which we'll share on social media. And the purpose of it is just community education and prevention awareness. So this is not a counselling or any legal advice. So don't share. Please don't share any sensitive details in the comment sections on social media. But I'm really pleased to introduce you to Laura Jane Phoenix Singh. Or Phoenix.
Okay. Phoenix.
Sweet. Thanks, sir. Who's joining us through We Ali?
Yeah, Ali, perfect.
Don't take it personal. I'm the worst for pronunciation. So
that's so fine.
So anyways, also known as LJ. Which one do you prefer, Laura Jane or LJ?
LJ.
Okay, cool. So you're Aboriginal woman from Quandamooka and Wurundjeri Nations and First Nations healing practitioner and facilitator. So her work includes cultural safety, trauma-informed support with children, young people, women and families, and you bring deep expertise around, grounded in culture, connection, relational care and community strength. So without further ado, thank you, and I'll let you take over to have a yarn. And but if you need me for anything, just let me know. I'll be just in the background.
Okay, perfect.
Thanks, LJ.
Hi everyone, my name's LJ. I'm a proud Quandamooka woman. I was born on Ngunnawal country. I was raised between Yuin Nation and Mianjin, and I've lived on beautiful Wadawurrung country for the past 10 years. I'm a research academic, which I have been doing for a few years now with Victoria University. I'm also an Atlantic Fellow, Senior Atlantic Fellow with the Atlantic Institute. This is a really important topic to talk about because when we think about healing, we think about how does that help us move through the world? What does it mean culturally? What does it mean in terms of recovery? So for the past 3 years, I've been working with We Ali, which is an organisation developed by Professor Arnie Judy Atkinson and her daughter Carly Atkinson. And it's an organisation that looks at the importance of culturally informed and trauma-informed cultural. Let's start again. It looks at the importance of culturally safe and trauma-informed care for community, and focuses on the importance of healing and recovery and what does that mean in the context of history. And, I guess how we think about the contemporary impacts of colonization on mob. I've worked in this sector for about 10 years. I've worked predominantly with Aboriginal women and young people, particularly those who have been incarcerated or those who are in the out-of-home care system. And something that I've seen within that space is the prevalence of domestic violence and sexual assault. Actually, I think when I think about the women that I've worked with in prison, I think majority have experienced domestic violence and sexual assault. And these are things that impact us to our core. And unfortunately, this is something that arrived in so-called Australia with the ships. And it's something that has deeply impacted our community, but it's not to be mistaken as something that is cultural, because it's not. It's absolutely not cultural or part of our culture, but it's something that has been done to us as a form of colonial violence. And now it's something that's deeply impacting our community. When I think about what recovery and resilience looks like from family violence, I think it's important to start by thinking about collectiveness and collective care, and that a lot of mainstream services focus on domestic violence as an individual issue or a women's issue or something that only impacts the person or the family going through it, but it's so much bigger than that. It's something that impacts society, it impacts children, it impacts development, it impacts everyone who's surrounded by it, and even those who are not. So when we think about what recovery looks like from domestic violence and where the pathways out, We need a collective approach, something that sits within service delivery, but it's also something that sits within community itself. How do we support people to leave if that's what they choose to do? How do we support people if they don't want to leave but want to feel safe within their relationships? And how do we support or encourage men to engage in recovery and rehabilitation, particularly when we think about things like men's behaviour change projects and programs? I think that recovery can be a complex topic, because what is recovery? What is healing? And what does this mean to us individually? For me, I reflect on my own experiences, both professionally and personally, and what my understanding of domestic violence looks like now, from growing up in a home where domestic violence was experienced, having experienced domestic violence as an adult and a young person, but then also working in a space with women who are experiencing or have experienced domestic violence. And what I think about is that accessibility is key. Making sure services are culturally appropriate and trauma-informed is key. And also looking at a whole of community approach. If we are seeing multiple instances of domestic violence in the same community, what's happening for them? Things like domestic violence don't happen in a vortex. They can be really heavily influenced by many different things, from access to mental health support, access to housing, poverty. But there's also the elements of power and control and direct violence and what that looks like. And so we really need to contextualize these things when we're thinking about healing and we're thinking about recovery and what that actually means. And also, in order to be resilient, or, some people might say bounce back from these experiences, we have to understand trauma. We have to understand what it does to us, not just on an individual sense, but on a collective sense, on a cultural sense, because all of these are deeply intertwined with how we respond to things, how we behave, how we engage with people, how we engage with our family. So it makes the issue of domestic violence itself complex, because we want women and families to recover from the experiences of domestic violence, but we also want the men who perpetrate family violence to no longer engage in such behaviour. I personally do believe that recovery is possible on both sides, and I think when we look at some of Carliac and Senanati Judy's work, they speak to this importance of recovery for everyone. And the reason that that's so important is because this is an issue that is deeply impacted by colonization. So we really need to think about what that looks like in a contemporary setting, and what that looks like for Aboriginal people specifically. I think that when we can understand these issues, we can also start to address gaps in service. Unfortunately, a lot of people who are trying to escape family violence or trying to understand maybe their behaviour or understand their experiences or understand what's being done with them, the services that are required for that are deeply underfunded. They aren't always accessible. Some of them have huge wait lists, and very many of the mainstream services are not always safe for Aboriginal women. And this is because they intersect with things like child protection and what it means for women who are experiencing family violence and trying to escape. We know that they're also at a higher risk of child protection involvement. So again, really complex issues. It means that people are often in fight or flight. They're in survival mode. It's really hard to consider things like recovery, resilience, healing pathways out when you're just trying to simply survive the experience itself. At We Are Lee, we talk a lot about connection. We talk a lot about collective care and about understanding people's experiences. I think for those of us who are practitioners, this is key. We need relationality. We need people to trust us. We need the people we work with to trust us so that we can help support them in deciding what's best for them. I think through my time as a practitioner, some of the best work I've done is when it's led by the person, whether that be a young person, a family as a whole, or a woman. We have to let them tell us what they need and then guide them in that process. When people are trying to escape family violence, they don't need more services and more people trying to override or dominate their choice. We actually need to encourage them to have choice, to make decisions, and support them to understand what that looks like for them. Because then whatever decision they make, because it is ultimately their decision, we can support them in a way that lasts. And that's something I'm really passionate about is choice. There are many services when it comes to domestic violence where women can't get access unless they leave. But leaving isn't always that easy. It's not a black and white situation. There's many shades of grey. So I think that when we think about service delivery, it's also thinking about how do we support women who are leaving, who are trying to leave or escaping, but how do we also support women and children who aren't leaving? And that's not where they're at yet, because they still deserve safety and they still deserve services and they still deserve support. It's really hard to ask someone to leave domestic violence if they don't have a house or they don't have economic support, if they don't have safety and community and collective care. So I think when we think about addressing these issues from a community perspective, it's really important to be open to understanding what is collective care. How do we support women and families and men together? How do we look at the role a whole of community plays when it comes to addressing these issues? And I think that when I think about Auntie Judy's work, who is, the founder of We Are Lee, she talks a lot about that too. Like, this is not just on service delivery and practitioners. This is on community, to hold each other strong, to hold each other accountability, to hold each other to account, to acknowledge history, to acknowledge pain, and then think about how do we heal together as families, as communities. And these are really, really important aspects of recovery. And when I think about what does recovery from domestic violence look like, I think recovery and resilience is moving out of that survival mode, moving out of that fight or flight, being able to reclaim your nervous system and understand what's going on for you, what you've been through, and then being able to articulate your needs, and hopefully have people around you and services around you that are able to help you meet those needs. And sometimes it starts with the most basic of things, like I said before, housing, food, financial security. But then it branches out to, knowing who you are, what you want to do with your life, what kind of things you want to engage in to reclaim parts of you that might have been lost. I think that resilience is an interesting word as well, because what is resilience? I think Aboriginal people have been required to be resilient for a really long time. And we shouldn't have to be. We should be able to live in softness. We should be able to live in spaces where resilience isn't required 24/7. So I like to sort of think about resilience as a form of resistance, and how are we resisting against things like colonial violence and And what does that mean, both as like an individual level, but also a community, on a community level? Because resilience it's hard to have to be resilient all the time. And I think that women, especially Aboriginal women, are often left to carry that burden more often than they should. So I would really like to think that the recovery and the support pathways out of this is not about necessarily being resilient and it ending there, but being able to live in softness and to thrive, to regain our nervous system, to be able to regulate, to be able to articulate what's going on for us and have language that adequately describes our needs and safety and what safety looks like for us. I think so many of us haven't really got to understand or experience safety, especially those who have experienced violence, whether it be intimate family violence or intergenerational violence. Safety can be hard to find, but it is something we're all deserving of. And I think when it comes to the support pathways, we need to think about what is safety? What is safety in a service? What is safety in community? What is safety when it's not when it's not defined by someone else? I often think about some of the work I've done with women, and it is asking them, what is safety for you? What does safety look like for you? Because safety, whilst it has like a generic definition, it can mean many different things to many different people. And that's why when we think about support pathways, we need to think about tailored support services and tailoring supports to the people that we're working with. You get better results, you get better engagement, and one size doesn't fit all. Actually, I think that very rarely works because people are so different, their experiences are different, their needs are different. And when we're able to look at the world that way, we can find people's stories of strength. We can find hope, and we can help others see the hope and the strength that they have as individuals. Something else that I guess is really important here to talk about is that we think about power and control, and we think about domestic violence relationships or intimate partner relationships. Power and control plays a big part of that. And often something that happens in those relationships is isolation. And when we feel isolated and we feel alone, strength and hope can be harder to find. So when we have women and children who are able to leave domestic violence situations, we really need to consider that collective care, that community response, that community engagement, so that the people most affected by violence still get to have a sense of belonging. And it might not necessarily be to their family, but it can be to community. And it can start by, one person, one women's group, one social event, taking them somewhere where safety is emulated. And I think, we think about support pathways and service delivery. ACCOs are often leading the way in that area. I know here in Wuthering Country where I live, we have some really strong ACCOs and support services, both formal and informal, that really assist with understanding purpose and that sense of belonging. When someone belongs to you and you belong to someone else, whether it be an individual or community, it helps you find your purpose. It helps you believe in yourself more. And once we start to believe in ourselves and our power, step into that, especially when it's been taken away, healing becomes something that is possible. Change becomes something that is possible. And then when we start to see that, we start to have hope. I really think that in a time when there are so many things happening in the world, hope is really important. And I guess for practitioners, we also have to have hope when we're in these spaces. When we are acting as a support pathway, when we are acting as the person that assists someone, whether it be an individual or family, to think about what is healing. You know, what are we doing for ourselves? What is our healing? How are we sitting on our healing journey? Auntie Judy talks about something, she calls it like burning your own wood. And I think in a time where practitioners are facing a lot of like burnout and a lot of stress and vicarious trauma as a result of like the overburdened systems, we also have to be thinking about our own healing, burning our own wood so that we can lead someone else to the fire. So they can burn their own wood and light their own fire. So it's important to consider that as well. Because these two things have to coexist alongside each other. You know, while we're helping and supporting others, we also must help and support ourselves. So what we bring into that circle, what we bring into that space, is strength, so we can help others see their own strength. And I think another thing to remember is we're not here to save people. We're here to assist them. We're here to encourage them. We're here to help them forge their own paths instead of being another person who's telling them how to walk and where to walk. We want people to have agency and autonomy. And I think a big part of recovery from experiencing family violence is autonomy and agency, and being able to reclaim your story and your experience and what works for you, and having that ability to speak to that. And this is really important when we think about that, like practitioner engagement or that person engagement or that community engagement, because we know that systems often don't provide agency autonomy. In actual fact, they often remove it, whether it be an NGO, a specialized domestic violence service, or an institution. They often don't promote agency and autonomy. So the people that sit outside of that, whether they be counselors, therapists, advocates, we really need to be reminding people that they have agency and autonomy, and that they are strong, and that they can do this, and that whilst it might be hard, and it almost always is, they aren't alone in that fight, but that they have the ability to fight, that they're worth defending, that they're worth believing in, and that we do in fact believe them. I think when we talk about domestic violence and we think about healing and resilience and support pathways, it's important to think about Aboriginal men and what they've experienced, and how colonization has impacted them. And that, you know, for our men that may perpetrate family violence, there's no excuse that we can make for that behavior, but it's important to think about what services can offer healing and resilience and recovery for them also. You know, here in Victoria, we have Dadi Momo, which is an amazing service that focuses on helping Aboriginal men who have perpetrated family violence and thinking about what recovery looks like. But in order to do that, we must consider colonization and colonial violence, and we must think about what that how that has impacted our culture. And, you know, I do believe that where possible, we need to provide options for change. I don't work with men. I work predominantly with women and children and young women, but I have had many colleagues who have worked with men and have seen good results. But again, it's about moving beyond the individual. It's about moving to a place where we are collectively supporting each other, and thinking about what that means within our communities, because we are stronger together, and healing doesn't happen in isolation. It's not just an individual thing. You know, we speak a lot about at WLE collective healing. And collective healing is when we come together and we support each other. And, you know, we might be healing from our individual traumas. We might be healing from shared trauma and intergenerational trauma, but we're also collectively healing from colonial trauma and colonial violence that has hurt each and every one of our families. We've got to think about that. What is collective healing? What is collective care? And what role does that play in healing and resilience? And understanding support pathways, because support has to look like more than just services. It has to look like relationality and reciprocity. It has to look like how we treat and engage with each other and how we want the people we work with to engage with us. You know, one of the most important things I learned whilst working in the women's prison is that our clients don't owe us anything. They don't owe us trust. They don't owe us care. They don't owe us kindness. That's our job. It's our job to create safety. It's our job to create trust. And it's our job to understand that depending on a person's experience, and this is, you know, especially true when we're thinking about domestic violence, is that when you've never experienced trust, or it's never been safe enough to trust someone, or your trust has been broken time and time again, it's not an easy thing to give to someone, especially a professional or a worker or a person you don't know. So it really is going in with an understanding of that, and that it's our job to develop the relationality. It's our job to understand. It's our job not to take things personally. And that, you know, if we're so for real about things like recovery and healing, we have to do the work and we have to understand this stuff so that we can work towards creating safe spaces that are culturally safe and trauma-informed, and thinking very deeply about what that means, and thinking about what the people we work with need, and that it's their choice. We must give people choice, because when people are empowered and they have autonomy and agency and they have choice, they're able to then start to articulate what they need. And if we can't understand what people need, or we don't give them the space to articulate and contextualize what they need, we really can't help. So I would really encourage you to think about that, to have a look at some of WLE's information that's available on the internet, to think about what being trauma-informed and culturally safe means. And what does healing mean to you? I think one of the things that I've reflected on over the years is, you know, when we speak about healing, we have to understand what healing means for us first. When we start to do that, we're able to then help other people answer that question for themselves. But healing is so many things. It's multifaceted, it's individual, it's collective, it's community, it's culture. But one thing's so for sure is that it looks different for everyone. But when we're able to get that individual healing and that collective healing in sync, we're able to heal more than the individual. We can heal the family, the community, country. This is really important when it comes to recovery. And, you know, I think it's just important to remember that pathways out of harm are more than just support services. We need to wrap our arms as communities around people who need support, because services, they don't always meet the needs. But as Aboriginal people, we know what our communities need. We know what our families need. We know what our children need. And we just have to work together to have those discussions, and really just reflect on what's going on for us as practitioners, what's going on in our communities, what's going on for the people we work with, and try and engage where we can in a really holistic way. I think that that's really, really important. healing, what's the saying? Healing isn't linear. It certainly is not linear. Healing starts and finishes wherever the person who's taking that journey wants it to. And I think it's important that resilience is resistance. Aboriginal people by nature are politicized. And when we're politicized, it leaves us, it means that we're more likely to experience, institutionalized racism, criminalization. All of these things can really hinder your ability to heal. But when we collectively resist against these things, we take up more space for each other, and we allow for the hard conversations to happen in safe places. Because when stories are told in safe places, healing can start. I want nothing more for particularly Aboriginal women, to stop having to be resilient and to get to be soft. But in order to do that, we must first step into the resistance. When we step into resistance, recovery is possible. Thank you so much for your time, and I hope that you have a deadly day. It was lovely hanging out with you all.
Cool. That was amazing. Yeah, really appreciate that, LJ.
I feel like I just rambled, so hopefully it was all right.
I know it was great. It was perfect. And I've got some quick questions if you've got the time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so you might have already talked about this, like individual focus with support pathways and all that kind of stuff. But I'll just put down, like, what does the culturally safe support pathway look like in practice?
Yeah, look, I think this is a question that we're getting asked more and more, especially like Aboriginal people who are in like the training space. And I think to be culturally safe, you have to be culturally conscious first, which means that for non-Indigenous people, you have to understand history, you have to understand your own biases, you have to understand your own identity. Because when you start to understand that, you can start to understand other people's experiences. And culturally safe, it's such an interesting term now, because people do culturally safe training. They read a book or whatever, and they consider themselves to be culturally safe. But I don't think even Aboriginal people aren't always culturally safe. It's an ongoing act. It's something you have to continuously do. You have to continuously educate yourself about what's going on in the world, but also look inside, because we all have biases. We all have views that we might have of people. And in order to be culturally safe, you have to constantly be challenging that. You have to be aware, and you have to be compassionate to yourself and others, but you also have to be working toward that cultural competency and that understanding that it's continuing on. I think that for me, a red flag of when someone isn't culturally safe is when they make a point to say that they are, because it's a continued learning. No one knows everything about culture or cultural identity, whether it be your own or someone else's. So just constantly be engaging in it. In terms of services, they also need to be putting in the work and making sure that their staff are consistently and continuously getting access to education and training.
That's amazing. Thanks for sharing. And just the last one, what is one takeaway you hope people will remember from this show?
Be relational. Remember that, like, the people that we work with, they don't owe us anything. It's our job to create safety. It's our job to be trauma informed, and it's our job to know where we are on our own healing journey, so we know what we're bringing to the space. Auntie Judy talks about burning our own wood, and we really need to do that work, because if we're hurting and we're hurt, or we're going through vicarious trauma or burnout, we're bringing that with us, whether it's intentional or not. So, it's that being relational, take care of yourself, and know if you can know what you need, you can help someone else to start to understand what they might need.
Perfect. Yeah, appreciate again your time and your knowledge, expertise with this. It's been really invaluable, really educational. So thank you, LJ, and I really appreciate the care, cultural knowledge, and the healing lens you brought to this yarn. Thank you, and yeah, enjoy the rest of your day.
Yeah, you too. Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
All right. So if there's anything that I go, that's really bad, you can just cut and do your bit, can't you? But we try to do as much in a one take.
Yeah, it's all good. No stress. But yeah, just hey everyone, and welcome to this workshop, this yarn around stories of strength. So my name is Dean Foley, and yeah, I'll be hosting Camilla from Canada, but I'll be hosting today on behalf of Community News Hub Aboriginal Corporation as part of the Stories of Strength project. Just a quick note before we start. So this is just for community education and awareness. It's not consulting, legal advice, or that kind of stuff. So yeah, if you share sensitive information, just please don't share personal information on social media in relation to this. Today's session is community accountability and healing, and we're grateful to be joined by Mel Brown from Spirit Dreaming, who brings deep knowledge around community wellbeing, lateral violence, healing, safe help seeking, and the role communities can play in preventing domestic, family, and sexual violence. So yeah, thanks for joining, Mel.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Dean, and thanks for the opportunity. So obviously, before I start, I'd just like to pay my respects to all the Aboriginal people and countries that are watching this today, and also just recognise that this training comes from a base of experience and knowledge that's shared between all of us. So thank you all, and let's start. So my story today is about community accountability and healing. So before we start, my name is Mel Brown. I'm a Ngunnawal woman from Canberra. Been living on Bundjalung country, up Ballina, Byron Bay area for about 20 years now. I come with over 30 years experience in working in Aboriginal child protection, healing, community wellbeing, cultural education, all those things. But I do want to acknowledge that today's conversation is about awareness, reflection, and strengthening our communities. So I'm hoping that at the end of this, we can come away with a few ideas on how to make that life better for the children that we're bringing forward now, our new families, our new children that will become parents, that will become leaders. This is what it's all about. Let's have a chat. So let's talk about things today. So I'm going to be talking about three particular topics. Lateral violence, what is it? It's a word that we're using a lot lately. We're going to talk about where it comes from, its impact on communities. I'm going to talk about creating safer communities. What's our community response to domestic, family violence, sexual violence? Prevention, how that starts with our relationships, and how important it is that every person has a role in creating our stronger communities. We're going to finish up with healing and breaking the cycle. And that is about just having awareness and not just being an individual response, but the response needing to come from community. Okay, so what is lateral violence? Look, it's a word that's becoming more and more used, and I'm loving that because I'm a lateral violence trainer. I probably do more lateral violence training than anything else these days. And am I happy about that? Not happy that we have to have this much training. Happy though that we're having the conversations. Change cannot happen without the conversations. So what is it? Look, often it's normalized behaviour that's existed over many generations. But normal doesn't mean healthy. This behaviour has existed for generations, but it does not mean it needs to continue. It means that what it does, it actually divides us from our families, from our communities, from our workplaces. It damages trust, relationships, connections, all those things. It has a lasting impact at times as well. So awareness today is about awareness. We need to create awareness because awareness creates change. Once we recognize these harmful behaviors, once we say, I know what that is, that's our first step to saying, you know what, this is not a way in which we heal and move forward in our communities. This is only a way in which we continue to create division in our workplaces, our organisations and our communities. So what is lateral violence? Let me read this. Lateral violence occurs when people who are experiencing powerlessness, let me rephrase that. I'm going to do that one again. So what is lateral violence? Lateral violence occurs when people who are experiencing powerlessness direct hurt, anger, frustration, and aggression towards each other instead of the systems that causes the harm. What are some of the behaviours that we're talking about? We are talking about gossiping. We're talking about rumour mongering. We're talking about exclusion and isolation. That one's an out 1 and 2. Bullying, intimidation, undermining each other, public shaming. That one's one of my big ones that makes me so sad when we do that. Social media attacks. That's a really big one, particularly for our young ones. That's cyberbullying, and family and community conflict. But if you do your own research as to what are lateral violence behaviours, I'm going to say to you, you know what? It's going to vary for each one of us. For what's a lateral violence behaviour for me might not be for you. So I always say to people, follow your gut. If you're not feeling comfortable with what's happening, have a think about it. Has someone been laterally violent towards you? Or is it just that you're having an off day? I don't know. But it's about that self-recognition. It's about knowing, is that lateral violence or not? This next statement I want to read to you. Lateral violence can be normalised behaviours that have existed for generations. You know, normal doesn't mean healthy. I've mentioned that before. These behaviours have become so familiar over years, over generations, that sometimes we don't even question them. What am I talking about? Really simple. Let's go to the gossiping. Hey, did you hear the story about when your intent is to manipulate, dominate and control the person that you're talking about? We have become so used to that behaviour. Hey, have you heard the latest gossip? I challenge that word gossip now. I go, is that good gossip, bad gossip? Is it something you would say in front of the person or something you wouldn't? And that really gives you an answer as to whether you should be continuing on or not. Children learn by watching adults. This is why we've created generations of lateral violence, generations of this harmful, hurtful behaviour. Silence also can be very harmful in these situations as well. Saying nothing is as bad as saying something. Awareness, when I say, let me rephrase that, saying nothing is as good. I want to do this one again. Sorry, I want to start all over. This slide. So what is lateral violence? Our next one, I want to read this statement to you. Lateral violence can be normalised behaviour that have existed for generations. Normal does not mean healthy. Okay, familiar behaviours that have been accepted for generations without being questioned. A great example would be gossip. Hey, have you heard the latest gossip about such and such? When the person's intent with that gossip is to manipulate, dominate and control. Okay, that we've done that for so many generations that it's become quite normalised. And the problem is our children are watching that happen and they're learning from our behaviour. Silence can allow for harmful behaviours to continue. If you say nothing, it's as bad as saying something that is continuing to that behaviour, something that is adding to that behaviour. So what we need to do, our first step, is to create some awareness and to create some steps to begin to make some changes. We haven't quite finished yet. So the next thing is about lateral violence creates hurt, harm and division within families, communities and workplaces. Yes. Lateral violence damages the trust in our relationships, our relationships begin to deteriorate or can begin to deteriorate. It creates fear and shame and isolation, weakens families and communities. I've done so much work in communities where we have found that these behaviours have almost destroyed communities. I can definitely say I've done a lot of work in organisations where, in some organisations, it has brought them to their knees, to almost where they do not exist anymore. That is how big this behaviour can be. And if you think about how that ripples out into communities, into our families, it's absolutely huge. Lateral violence can discourage people from speaking out. It undermines our teamwork. It prevents us from working together while we're so worried about the shame and the fear and all of those sorts of things. Then it makes it really difficult for us to work together. It divides people instead of strengthening the connection. But that's the point of lateral violence, is that division, that divide and conquer. Healing can begin once we find that place of respect and accountability and support. So where does it come from? It comes from loss of culture. Policies have been designed, and they still are today, designed to divide Aboriginal people. There are lots of even just more recent things that have happened in in Australia over the past few years that have divided our communities. And they're policies that are made deliberately. I don't think the government would say they're made deliberately, but I feel, when I'm calling it on the cultural safety lens, when I see it in the cultural safety lens, I'm saying that it could be a deliberate policy making. Because while we're too busy fighting ourselves, we're not actually fighting the policy that's got us to that position. And it causes trauma. And we're bringing generational trauma. So this has been happening for generations, and we bring this generational trauma with us into everything that we do. So I just want to remind us that lateral violence is not who we are as Aboriginal people, okay? Lateral violence is a symptom of trauma, not a symptom. It is not a reflection of our culture. Hurt people often hurt people, and healing people helps with healing other people. So what is the impact of lateral violence on community wellbeing? It damages relationships, creates distrust, impacts on our wellbeing, and weakens our communities. How does it weaken our community connections? Here's a couple of examples. A community member that could be excluded from events because of rumours. I see that one happens quite regularly. Someone who starts in a new role and is criticised and not encouraged for being in that role. Families stop talking to each other because of unresolved conflict, and people avoid community meetings because of fear of judgment, fear of gossip, and even just fear of their own safety being there. So when people don't feel safe or welcoming, community connections begin to absolutely break down. I want you to think about the time. This is a really big one. I want you to go deep here. Think about a time when somebody encouraged you instead of criticising you. How did that make you feel? Now imagine if every person in our community experienced that same support. We would have different types of communities then. We absolutely would. We would have families feeling safe to ask for help. We would have young people growing up believing that they're actually valued and capable. We would have young people celebrating their successes instead of being ashamed of their successes. Workplaces that support and encourage and mentor each other, and the list goes on. And you will have some really wonderful ideas of your own of what if, circle back to this question that's on the slide. What if we supported one another rather than bringing each other down? What would that look like for you personally, in your family, in your community, in your workplace? What would that look like? I tell ya, it would look like a pretty amazing place. So, lateral violence, it is not, there is a cross beside that. It is not traditional in our culture, yet what we need to do is we need to respect and have collective responsibility around our behaviours. I want to move on to creating safer communities now. Safer communities are built on connection, respect, and shared responsibility. Everybody has a role in creating an environment where everybody feels valued, heard, and supported. Prevention starts really early in providing. I'm going to do this slide again. So creating safer communities. Safe communities are built on connection, respect, and shared responsibility. Everybody has a role in creating an environment where people feel valued, heard, and supported. Prevention starts really early, and I want to start looking at some of those ideas for a moment. So when we're talking about safer communities, we're talking about domestic violence, family violence, sexual violence. Obviously, they are not the only ones. They will be some of a number of different things that make a community safer. But they're the three I'm going to just touch on for a moment. Violence. Let's just talk about all of those types of violence. They affect everybody. Domestic, family, sexual violence, all impacts on individuals, families, communities, children, broader communities. It impacts on everybody. Violence creates lasting harm. We know that. I'm not telling you anything new here. You already know this. It contributes to our trauma. It contributes to that ongoing fear and isolation. And this is the stuff where we can create generational trauma. It is certainly the stuff that we've brought with us through many generations to where we are now. But if it is left unaddressed, then it's going to look different for everybody, but it doesn't look good. It just doesn't look good. Strong communities help prevent violence. Okay, so safe relationships, cultural connection, support, community accountability, all those things are keys to keeping a community safe, creating safe families. So all of those things are really, really important. But we won't talk just about domestic, family and sexual violence. I just want to talk about, I'm going to move to another slide now. I want to talk for a moment about myths or truth. I want to challenge some of those myths some things that we absolutely misunderstand. I want to replace those myths with actual facts that help us feel safer, okay, and more informed. These that I'm going to talk about maybe 3 or 4 different types of myths that I come across regularly as a counsellor. But I want to talk about these because I think if we can dispel these myths, if we understand what truth is, truth empowers change. So when communities recognise everyone has a role in promoting respect and speaking up and supporting others, then we can, I'm just repeating it again, we can become stronger, safer and better equipped to prevent violence. And I'm going to underline that one, to prevent violence. The better we are at this understanding what some of the trauma is, dispelling some of these myths, I think that I actually know that life would be a little bit different for us. Okay, so let's have a look at my first one. My first myth is, if anyone experiences violence, they will ask for help. That is an absolute myth, guys. Okay. The truth is, many people experiencing violence are fearful, ashamed, isolated, or worried that they will not be believed. Not asking for help doesn't mean someone isn't experiencing violence. If you are seeing that, it's about conversations. And I'm going to be a bit of a broken record around this over the next few slides around the myths, because it's about a conversation. It's about recognizing that something's not, or a person's not okay, and talking with them or giving them a moment or an opportunity where they can talk to you. Okay, let's have a look at our next one. It's not my place to get involved. If I could have $1 for every time someone said, you know what, it's not my place to get involved, that's garbage. It is absolute garbage. Early support can prevent isolation and from it actually becoming a crisis. From it, maybe taking a life or causing injury, not only physical injury, but psychological injury. You don't need to fix the problem. You just need to connect the person to support. You do not have to be the answer to everything. You just have to be there. You just have to say, wow, this is bigger than me. Not sure what to do here. Can we, talk to me about it so that we can come up with an idea of where we go next or what you would like for me to do next. You do not have to be the solution. You just have to be willing to be that bridge to the support. And whether that's about saying, Aunt, I think that maybe this is a bit bigger than me. Maybe we could have somebody else. Can I speak to someone else about this? Or maybe you and I could go and speak to somebody else about this. Or maybe could I ring someone for you? Or could I give you a phone number and maybe I could check in with you in a couple of hours to see if you've rung that phone number? I don't know. For each and every one of you, that support will look different, but it is entirely important to provide that support. My next myth is talking about violence will make things worse. No, it does not. It does not make things worse. Respectful conversations can reduce shame, increase awareness, help people access support. Silence protects violence, not people. I want to say that one more time. Silence protects violence. Silence does not protect people. Silence protects violence. Safe conversations support people. It's not about forcing a disclosure. It's not about sit down, you need to tell me what's happening here. It's about creating opportunity for support. Safe conversations, I want to say it one more time. Safe conversations do not create violence. They create an opportunity for healing. The next myth I want to talk to you about for a moment. I need to stop for a sec. I've got a dog that needs to get out. Hold on, I'll be back. One sec. The next one I want to talk to you about is this is another myth that comes up quite regularly. One conversation cannot make a difference. Let me tell you, one conversation can absolutely make a difference. Many people who have escaped violence can identify one person who listened. That is huge. Let me say that again. Can identify one person who listened, who believed them and helped them to take the next step. Even if you didn't follow them through with that next step, many people who have escaped violence have just found that one person who they can go back to and just go, you know what, that was the person that listened. They might not have done much, but they listened and then I was able to do something as a result. Feeling heard and believed can give someone the confidence to seek help. We hear this all the time. How many times have you heard, as soon as somebody has felt believed, then they have the confidence to do the next thing. We hear this really regularly. On a regular basis when people tell their stories from moving from violence to safety. Every conversation is an opportunity to show someone that they are not alone. You're not alone. I'm there with you. I might not be, it might be that you're on the end of a phone, or it might be you as you're dropping in and out of their life for just a moment. Or you might be that somebody that will be in their life for a very, very long time. It doesn't matter. The point is, if somebody feels they're not alone and isolated, you can make a whole lot of difference. You cannot change somebody's life in one conversation, but you can change the direction of it. I'm really big in saying, I don't do the work, you do the work. I might be the person that you're having a conversation with today, but I don't do the hard work. It's you who does the hard work because you're the one who has to make the hard changes. So I can't change another person's life. It's only up to them to do it, but I could be part of their journey when they're doing that. So just to, I guess, sum up creating safer communities, there's two really big statements here that mean a lot to me. A caring conversation and a supportive person can be the first step towards safety. People may not always remember exactly what was said, but they often remember who sat beside them. I want to just end that section with just those words because I think they are really huge words for me. Particularly, people do not always remember exactly what you said, but often remember who sat with them. If you've ever been in that position, or somebody, you've been through that journey with somebody and they come back to you and they say, you know what, I can't even remember that conversation I had with you, but you gave me the courage to do what I had to do next. Okay, our next section is healing and breaking the cycle. Ooh, nice and easy. This one's an easy one. No, it's not. I'm only joking. It's really actually quite hard. Healing begins with awareness, and that is we can't change what we don't recognise. We need to know what we need to recognise first, and every positive choice matters. Small acts of respect, kindness, accountability, all of this creates healthy, stronger, happier families and communities, and that's what we're aiming for. Let's look at this for a moment, this slide. It says, how do we break the cycle? We have to have awareness. We need to take responsibility. We need to listen without gossiping. Whew, that's a hard one, listen without gossiping. Strengthen identity. All of this can strengthen identity and belonging. We can learn and mentor, then heal. I think that's a huge one. The more we can go through this, the better it is, because we can have our own experiences of learning. We say, hey, you know what? This is what worked well for me. It might not work well for you, but, you know, this works. So what could work for you? And then through that mentoring, people can begin to heal. Most importantly, celebrate those successes when things go right, when people that you've spoken to get it right and they do make changes, you've got to come back and go, you know what, you did really, really well. I find that people's ego gets in the way here, and they might say, you know, oh, look, you know, I'm glad I told you that. No, because they didn't have to listen to you. They did the hard work. They are the ones that were able to hear for that moment and then make the change. So healing begins with awareness and responsibility. Recognise the behaviours, reflect on your own actions, and choose respectful responses. A response like, yeah, he is an idiot, or yeah, she is blah, 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 they are not helpful responses. So try not to use the negatives. Just go, okay, rightio, yep, that sounds like that's a really difficult behaviour, or how are we going to manage it? We need to... The next point is choosing our connection over our division. Let's listen without gossiping. That's a huge one. Build trust, strengthen identity, all those things. Listen without gossiping. We don't need to, what do we call it in some of our communities? Yarn carrying. We don't need to do that, okay? We need to, as I said a little bit earlier, is this good gossip or bad gossip? Is this gossip I would share? Like good gossip is, oh, did you hear Auntie such and such won lotto yesterday? Wasn't that bloody, that was fantastic. Oh my goodness. Opposed to, hey, did you hear Aunt down the road there? She won lotto the other day. I bet you she don't share it with nobody. That's not the gossip we want. That's the bad gossip. We need to grow and we need to lift others up with us. We need... The more we learn, the more we can mentor, the more we celebrate other people's successes, but it has to be a real celebration of success. It can't be, you know, this gammon stuff. Oh, yeah, you did good, but you don't really mean it. It has to be real. Because celebrating successes can sometimes make a change that lasts for generations. Okay. So healing and breaking the cycle. Healing is not just an individual responsibility. Healing is a community responsibility. What do I want for our future? What do I want our future to look like? This is a really easy one for me because as a grandparent of 9 grannies so far, what do I want for them? What do I want their world to look like? Because the buck stops with me right here, right now, because the way I manage myself, the way I behave is showing my grandkids, my little grannies, what I want their life to be like. You know, I mightn't have got it right with my own kids, so I'm trying to get it right with my grannies. And maybe if they can learn some things, you know, what difference can it make to that generation? Violence is not our identity. I want to bring that up before we finish. Violence is not our identity. Our culture has always been built on connection, on our families, respect, the way we care for each other as a collective, as a group. When we strengthen our culture, when we support one another and choose healing over hurt, what would our communities look like? Wouldn't it be fantastic? Our communities looked a little bit different to what they did now. I'm not saying your community is good or bad or anything like that, but I'm saying show me a community that couldn't, I guess the word is be better for some of these strategies. I reckon we've got good communities there. And look, together we all get to break these cycles. We all get to create that vision for our children, for our grandchildren, because you know, that song, Our Children Are the Future, because they absolutely are. So if you want motivation to look at lateral violence differently, if you want motivation to, I guess, manage the different types of violence in our communities, our families, and our workplaces, this is how we break the cycle, with a vision and a want and a need to change what the future looks like. Because I know that the world that my mum grew up in as an Aboriginal woman is different to how I've grown up, and I want it to be different yet again for the way that my grandchildren are growing up. So that brings us to the end of our very quick session, but I encourage you all, do some lateral violence research. There's some really good websites out there. And I think that the more that we name the elephant in the room, the better that we're going to be. So go out there, be our lateral violence. Don't want to say warriors, but go out there and do the very best that you can. Preach it, mentor it, change our lives. All right, guys, I'm going to leave it over to you now to make those changes that you might want to lead.
Good old technology. Thank you, Mel. That was amazing. Really appreciate the care and strength you brought to this conversation. And yeah, there was a lot to it, even though it was short. There was a lot of very helpful information. And yeah, I can definitely relate, and my own experiences, my own community. So it's definitely something that needs to be fixed. And yeah, appreciate your work you're doing to change things. So for anybody watching this later, like if you or someone else in immediate danger, if you feel comfortable, you can call 000 or contact 1800 Respect, 13 Yarn or Lifeline. There's a lot of people out there to potentially help. And yeah, we'll now close this session. But yeah, thank you again for contributing to Stories of Strength.
It's my pleasure.
Hey,
Hi,
hey everybody. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, go. You go.
Okay, so yeah, welcome to this Stories of Strength recording session, the workshop yarn, and my name's Dean Foley, and yeah, I'll be in the background, but on behalf of Community News Hub Aboriginal Corporation and the Stories of Strength project, yeah, it's great to have you here to create awareness around some of the issues and education materials. Today's session is safe storytelling, consent. You'll hear about Dixie's personal history, small little baby in background, but we're very pleased to be joined by Dixie Link-Gordon, who brings strong legal and community experience to this yarn. Dixie will speak to, her own story and consent, privacy, boundaries, and how people can share or support stories without causing future generational harm. So Dixie, thank you for joining us and for contributing your knowledge for Stories of Strength. So I'll hand over to you.
Well, thank you so much, Dean, and I appreciate the invite to come and talk. Yes, my name's Dixie. I'm a Gurang woman living in Gadigal country for at least 46 years now. How did I get into working and being part of the anti-violence movement, the anti-domestic violence movement specifically, and the awareness around sexual violence? I don't believe it was a mistake. I believe that I was to meet so many people as a young mum with 5 children, so many really good women who were in and around the Redfern community. Redfern, who for those who aren't aware, is the, to quote a very well-known artist and women's movement lady, Colonial, was the Black Mecca. And that's how it felt for me, coming from Brisbane and as a very young person, and then making a life down here and growing up my 6 kids and my 30 grandchildren, being part of the lives of my 30 grandchildren and my 5 great-grandsons. So it has been a journey. And coming from Brisbane, which was, it was a pretty up and down childhood, and where unfortunately unresolved violence and abuse was a little bit of, it wasn't just a little bit, it was a big part of my childhood. So trying to find a place where I felt that I belonged and I could move through it, life in a more safer way was something that I really strive to do. And I always felt, well, what's going to be scary out in the big wide world, when it was pretty scary where I had come from as a child. So one of the turning points for me would definitely have to be being inspired of the unity that we showed as Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in 1988. I just had my 5th child, and I went in that massive march from Redfern down to Central. I felt so proud. I felt so I was just in my element of feeling so much love for our mobs and us all just coming together and being and doing and knowing that we are the first peoples of this country. So that was something that's so significant in my life. And I just thought, pushing the kids, and they're doing, I'm more than just a mum of 5 children. There's stuff that I know that I was I wanted to do something about. I didn't know how to do it. How was I going to, find this journey of safety and be able to live and breathe by it for my life? So fortunately for me, I was to meet a very beautiful woman who was already working in the women's movement, and she's seen me and she asked me what I was doing. At the time, I was at the local preschool doing a mum's program course. So I was just joining other mums. I had a couple of kids in the preschool. She says, we have a part-time traineeship job going. Do you want to come? And so I end up going over to and getting this traineeship, where I end up staying for a couple of years. And it was called Stepping Out Housing, and it was housing for women who had experienced sexual violence. And so became my introduction and my pathway to learn and understanding more about what you can do, where you can go when you have experienced acts of physical, sexual, and mental violence. So, was able to do lots of different courses. Meanwhile, I had a sister who was down at the university, had a beautiful preschool that was supporting young mums and their children, and I just went on to stay in that pathway. So I was there for a couple of years, and then when I went on to have my 6th child, by that time I was at another organisation was for homeless women, and I used to do the graveyard shift there. And I think I worked there till I was about 7 months pregnant, and I used to work with homeless women. Had my baby, then I went for a job at one of the oldest women's establishments at the time, women's programs, organisations. So that was the South Sydney Women's Health, and I started working there when my daughter was about 3 months old, and I stayed with that organisation as it transitioned over to an Aboriginal women's organisation by 1992. So that was 4 or 5 years after our 1988 march that I really felt that I was walking in my pathway around safety and finding and learning that my right to be safe was my basic human right too. So stayed around there for a while, got the privilege of being involved in, the first domestic violence court assistance programs that they ran here in the state, and alongside my very good friends. And it was, for me, it was just a wonderful journey, and something that I've grown up with. I was, later further be able to go on and get a degree in community management and just do many courses that were interrelated with my work that I was doing around the safety of women. And, our right to be safe, and our right to say that if I'm going to have a family and have children, this is about us being safe, and how those decisions were being made. Colonization, as we know, has played a very harmful impact on us and our families and where we go and what we do. I had, beautiful grandmothers who really did their best for myself and my sisters. I was the eldest of 9 girls from my father's side, and from my mum, I was the second eldest after my beloved brother. So, it was a journey for us. And, growing up in the very early 60s was, we were still the fauna and flora of the country. We weren't yet respected for who we were as First Nation people of this country. So for me, learning about safety and protection has been a life, self-protection, self-preservation, however you want to say it, has been a lifelong journey for me, and someone who now I am in my 60s, and I'm watching my own family grow up, and how we respond and how we walk through this life and do the best we can for each other. Because I'm always of this belief, if we're not going to do it, we can't expect anybody else to do and take us on a journey of safety. It's a journey of a safe lifestyle where our kids are going to grow up healthy, where, we're not constantly have our back up the wall, for constantly fearing that guilty of nothing that we've done, and that's a big thing, just feeling shame about being a black fella. Well, no, not that's not going to happen. And I think that I know that I found that in Redfern, where people, do walk around with pride. They do want to do better, and people are, like so many beautiful places across Australia, and people are doing the best they do in their on their country and in their towns and cities, the remote communities. Everybody wants to be able to get up in the morning in peace, go to sleep in peace, and know that your children and your elders and your family are at peace. So I have had a wonderful, it's been a wonderful journey, at times very challenging. And going into any community, which is a lot of my work has unravelled to be, is, being a community advocate and going to share and speak with others and find out what other people are doing around the state. And, at the moment, I'm supporting a team of wonderful workers who are doing primary prevention and talking about what that looks like for us as Aboriginal mobs all across New South Wales, and one of my more passionate jobs is the Breaking Silent Codes network. And it's not so much an organisation, it's a networking with other people who've had the experience of sexual violence. And what are we doing to take care of ourselves? You know, I've been fortunate to go to the United Nations and present and meet some very wonderful women in the CSW, the Commission for the Status of Women. So I've met some great friends there, and friend from over Aotearoa, and we've always said that if we're going to tell our stories on an international level, we've got to tell them ourselves. We can't have everybody else talking about us poor black fellas, us poor women who, you know, us poor Aboriginal women who can't get it together. Well, you know what? We can. We're empowered to do that and surround ourselves with other good mob who are there ready to work for us. So during these, so that was in 2018, and so we had our first gathering here in New South Wales at the University of New South Wales, where we had the Gender Violence Research Network, where an awesome group of women supported us and us leading our own response and building a network. The next year we were in New Zealand, Aotearoa. After that we went to Queensland, Fiji, and we went back to the CSW and presented and met with the First Nations women in the New York, Shinnecock women in the New York region, New York City region. So it was, it's just been an amazing journey as First Nations women, for us having our own voice, being safe in that, knowing that when I walk into my house is a safe place, feeling free to be able to walk up and if something's not going right for us, have the ability to say, well, this hurts, it doesn't feel good, whether it's with wider society or even with family. We have to say, I'm opting out of this, it doesn't feel good, I feel unsafe. And that's not to say that, you know, some relatives you love from a distance, and that's just the way it goes. And, you know, we all got that right. We don't have to be loaded up within a violent environment because that's our family, or I've got to go to that job because where am I going to get money from? We do have choices and we do have rights, and I couldn't stress it enough to everybody understand. You deserve to be able to lay your head down on a pillow at night and feel a sense of safety and a sense of life's going to be okay, you know, and having a strong network of people around. There are many organisations out there, Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal organisations, who are prepared to support and be on a journey with you in finding the safety you need. Whether you're going through a whole homelessness path that hopefully it does not last forever, whether you're insecurities about your parenting, that you know you need to have a yarn to someone about parenting, we can do this. You know, there's so many really deadly people who are, you know, they might just be on one part of your journey, you know, from getting into a safe house. Thank you, you helped me get into a safe house. Now I've got kids I want to rear up. What are the things that I need to help me? And not be afraid to reach out. And because at the end of the day, the police, the DCJs, the DOCS officers, they haven't got all the answers for us. We have to find the answers within, and with that, we've got a network with good mob who are going to help us do that, going to support us in acquiring the goals we need to for us having a safer lifestyle. Working in this area has been it's been so valuable to me. It's not about me getting out there. I've been able to grow and not just getting out there and certainly not telling people, but actually sharing good moments of what our truth looks like for us, where we can go and get the right support. So it's been a wonderful, wonderful opportunity to be and do this throughout my whole life. And I see myself as probably, I don't know if I'll ever retire, but nothing is more beautiful than seeing a mum and dad doing the best they can that come from our families, and looking after their children and ensuring their children get educated, get to have good lives, and know that they can go and get support. We have so many different organisations that can help you with the various things that may be happening in your life. And I say to anybody, don't be afraid to reach out. Don't be afraid to say, this hurts. I feel like I've got to go and have a yarn to someone. And if you don't want to go into an office, going into an organisation, you can certainly ring up and have a yarn on the phone. And hopefully the online numbers that the Dean may put up here for you is where you can go and say, hey, I just need to have a talk to someone about what's happening for me. And you're safe, and you feel okay about it. When it comes to sharing your story, I think it's important to know that you want to do it with someone who's going to handle your story with integrity and listen in confidentiality. Your story is not for the world until you're prepared to tell it. I say that to everybody. You are the expert on your own life. And if you don't want your story told, that's okay. You don't have to. But if you need to, certainly not told publicly. And, if someone's working with you and you need that, the ultimate confidentiality, ensure you let them know that. And if you don't feel that you're receiving that, there is a pathway to find someone who can do that for you, and for those who may at any time breach your confidentiality, for those to be accountable for that through their workplaces, as of course. Talking safely to mob for me and has been is something that I can honestly say I humbly take any sharing of anybody. I take it with the utmost respect, and I do feel very grateful that people can trust me with that. And I wouldn't exchange that for anything. When you come from a lot of stuff where there was so much distrust, trusting becomes the gold. Whether you're the person listening about it, or listening around a story, or the person giving the story, trust is very, very valued to me. Trust and doing stuff with a bit of integrity. If you're going to get yourself from A to B, you want to get there safely. And if you're going to support someone doing it, that too has to be done in the most safe and kind way. I won't say loving way, but you got to use a lot of kindness, and that kindness doesn't just of you displaying that. The kindness has to come from you giving that too. So every day I get up, have my morning coffee, look at my little balcony garden, and know that it's going to be another beautiful day, and that I being kind and respectful to people is something that I value in my life. It's a value that I can really articulate a lot better now. As a young person coming out of trauma, I could never ever, who had experienced a lot of trauma, I could never say how I felt. All I knew is that I didn't like violence. I didn't like being screamed at, and I didn't like not being able to have a sleep for fear of the violence that had erupted, in the house. So that type of experience never ever left me. So I'm always conscious that if I'm out there sharing and doing what I do with people, that I always keep that in mind, that we all deserve that. We all deserve the safety. Our history of families being ripped apart, families, being moved from one side of the continent to the other, has had a really damaging effect on all of us. For us to be able to reflect and understand that, we know we have to be kind to each other today in this world when we're moving through life. So you'll find your safe people wherever you may be. There are safe people, and don't forget, you do have hotlines. You can jump on and have a yarn to someone and express what you need to get done. But once you find that sense of peace, you feel so empowered to think, because you can go home to your little safe house. You can say, oh, this is enough, and you'll set your boundary at what is acceptable for you and what is not acceptable. I feel good being able to say that at 65, but I sure as God couldn't say it when I was a 16-year-old girl. And having this little opportunity to share that with you, I hope that people will know that we're all worth something. We live in a beautiful, beautiful country, and hopefully we are moving forward to be able to look at each other and say, I respect you, I care about you, and if there's something going on, I'm just going to say, hey, okay. Okay, Dean.
Sorry. Yeah, that was awesome. Appreciate that. Got a few quick questions, if that's okay. I feel like you've covered a bit. Like, what should people think about before sharing someone else's story? Like, I mentioned, like, if it's your story, you have the rights, but like, what about other people? They need it, obviously, from a legal perspective, but from a cultural perspective.
From a cultural, so if someone, definitely, if there's abuse in related to children, and can you hear me? Yep. And a child comes and says, hey, auntie, or hey, nan, this has happened. Of course, you've got to respond to that. If a young person comes and says to you they're feeling insecure about something, or, oh, I don't like mum's boyfriend, whatever, yes, of course, you've got to respond to that. And when you are going to respond, make sure you got yourself, you're safe, and you've got safe people around you. It can be very confronting for the person who may be the perpetrator, and especially if they're have that sort of bully persona around. So that's got to be understood. If you're someone who's concerned about, if you're an ACLO at the school and you're seeing stuff that's going on and with one of the little kiddies, then that'll be talking to someone who's trustworthy and that they can help if they need to ask questions of the family, or whether they indeed have to move forward and report anything that may be needed. So it does depend on the circumstances. If there's a whole bunch of stuff, I mean, social media has gone hectic on us, and anybody who uses social media can understand that. There's way too much of the violence that's perpetrated in our community is just out there as fodder. I don't know what else I can say. Clickbait. Look at this. Everybody's having a big fight. Let's put this on. Anybody who knows, we are the biggest use of social media. We get out there, we take advantage of it. So with social media comes the good and the bad. It's great to be connected, but how are we connecting? I think that's a really big thing that we have to be mindful of, and it's getting more and more complex as social media grows, and how these programs that are infiltrated into your everyday use of social media and how that's used is so I just think that everybody has to go and do a little bit of introduction around what abuse looks like on social media. Where I'm involved in something being developed at this point, so that it's going to be a little bit more Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander friendly. We do have the E-Safety Commission. They have a bit of training there for young people or for older people who are observing young people maybe using social media not in a good way, because that unfortunately does break a lot of confidentialities, relaying people's stories, putting them out there. Do you have permission to tell a story repeatedly and say who that person is? And all you're doing is passing on particular as we would say, inappropriate yarns. Yeah. So I think there's a lot to be said about how we be safe and how we move through that. And I will keep you in touch, Dean, when we do have our little video done around what it can look like. And how our stories are our stories, and we are moving into that. Like even today, my sharing with you, there's a certain data, everything I've shared I wanted to share, and there's a certain data sovereignty that you have as the person taking care of the stories of strength, and I certainly trust that. I've said everything I wanted to say. I don't feel anything's been breached or anything like that, and I'll certainly give permission for you to relay or play it up how you do it. So I hope that answered your question a bit.
Yeah, thanks. The whole thing's been amazing, and please do share the resources. Keen to check them out. And I guess the final thing would be just, what would you want Aboriginal community members, or support services, or allies to remember from this session?
I think people just remember that I had a beautiful saying by one of the I did a program yesterday, a bit of a little community education, and one of the women said, everybody just be respectful. You don't know how anybody's feeling on any day. So if you're feeling exhausted and you've got a front up at the desk, remember that someone walking in seeking help, they probably took a lot for them to walk over the threshold. So if you're feeling like, I don't really want to talk to anybody, maybe do a little quick swap over with another worker for an hour or so. And just, as the saying is, you never know what anybody's carrying around on their back or in their backpack of emotions on any given day. And it's something that we've got to be respectful. So just that respect and that caring and sharing, especially if you are working in the sector, especially encountering family. And if some stuff's too much for you, well, we've got to say that's too much. I can't deal with that today, and not be afraid to say it instead of sitting and dwelling in it and getting all caught up and then getting angry about how you respond to someone who's not having a good time not having a good day. I hope that makes a bit of sense.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And yeah, especially in this day and age, it's hard to have that social awareness because everything's very fast-paced and self-centered. So yeah,
it certainly is. And we're social mob, but we're very relationship people, We have relationship with friends, we have relationships with family that at times may not always, be in line. And sometimes we'll just say, well, actually, I love you and I love you from a distance, You've been my friend, but I think that our pathways are going a bit different, And I think the best thing anybody can give another person every day, which I know I try to do, is how are you, and give them a smile and a little bit of engagement. And, you see them the next time, they pick you up when they're saying, oh, hey, how you going, Auntie Dixie, what you doing? And I feel good, I think, I'll sit down the front of my apartment block and I'll say hello to somebody and it'll make my day. Yeah.
That's amazing. We need more people like you out there. So yeah, thanks again, Mel. It's been amazing. I'm looking forward to seeing the resources you create, the videos and stuff when you share it.
I'm definitely going to share it to you, Dean. You're on my list. You're on my hit list.
No,
Okay.
yeah, I'm keen. I'm happily subscribed to the list. So but yeah, really appreciate the care and strength you brought to this conversation. And yeah, you mentioned it before, but if anybody's watching this, when we post it, if you're in immediate danger, you feel comfortable, obviously 000 or the support services out there like 13-9, 1800 Respect or Lifeline, or people like yourself. A lot of people out there that want to help and make things better. So yeah, we'll now close things, but yeah, thanks again for contributing to Stories of Strength.
Yeah, thank you so much, and I appreciate it having to have that yarn, and I'll talk to you all later. Thanks again. Thank you so much. Okay.